Hello, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's web seminar. This is Debbie Rauscher with John Burton Advocates for Youth. We still have a few people logging on, so I'm going to wait another minute or so, and then we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Debbie with John Burton Advocates for Youth. I know we're about 2:01, but I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so because I can see people logging on still, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Debbie Rauscher with John Burton Advocates for Youth. I am very excited to welcome everybody this afternoon to today's webinar, Growing Your Program, Tools for Outreach, Recruitment, and Understanding Eligibility. Next slide, please. So I'm very excited to introduce the presenters who are going to be joining us on the webinar today. So as I mentioned before, my name is Debbie Rauscher, and I'm with John Burton Advocates. And I am joined today by three fabulous presenters. First, we have Colleen Ganley, who's with the California Community College Chancellor's Office. We also have Flo Charlie with Sierra College, and Veronica Salmeron Sosa with Fresno City College. So they've got a lot of great information to share with you all today. But if we can go to the next slide. I wanted to start with a couple of logistical pieces of information. So the handout from today is, it can be downloaded from the handout section of the control panel, the PowerPoint. So we have saved the PowerPoint as a PDF. If you want to be able to print it out and follow along or take notes or just save it for later use, you can go ahead and do that on the control panel. You'll see where it says handouts. If you click on that, it'll pull down the list of handouts, which is just one, the PowerPoint, and you can go ahead and download it to your desktop. In addition, we will be doing question and answer at the end of today's web seminar. If you have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the questions panel and send them over to me. And we will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of the web seminar. We will be saving all questions until the very end. So feel free to send your questions at any point during the webinar as they come up. We also are recording today's web seminar, and so we will be posting the recording as well as the presentation materials on both the John Burton Advocates for Youth website and the California College Pathways website. And I will send out a link following the web seminar to everybody who joined us today with information about how you can access the recording. So if we can go to the next slide. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. One thing I will just preface before I turn it over to Colleen. I know we've got a lot of different folks on the call today. Some of you are with Next Up programs. Some of you are with Guardian Scholars programs or FYSI programs or different kinds of programs that serve foster youth. We're going to start out today with a little bit of information about eligibility for the Next Up program specifically. And so I want to recognize that this will be more relevant to some of you and less to others. Following Colleen's presentation, Flo and Veronica are going to talk about outreach and recruitment strategies, which really are very widely applicable. Many of them can be used for any kind of program. So I just wanted to share that with folks. And with that, I will turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Debbie mentioned, my name is Colleen Ganley, and I serve as the Next Step Program Lead at the Chancellor's Office. And, you know, we're starting the learning community with program outreach and recruitment because a lot of the colleges who've been operating the program from the very beginning, from 2016, have reported that getting youth into their programs is quite a challenge. So we thought it was really important to start with that as we, just brought on 19 new colleges. Today, I'll be providing a little bit of background information about KFES, and I'll do a brief overview on program eligibility. And then I'll be turning it over to your colleagues, your college colleagues, to share information about their outreach and recruitment strategies. It's worth noting that both of today's presenters, college presenters, have robust programs, and they're very, very effective at serving youth in their programs. So for a little bit of background, KFES was established by Senate Bill 1023, which allowed the Chancellor's Office to start programs in up to 10 districts. Senate Bill 12 allowed for the expansion of the program in up to 20 districts. And KFES, the Cooperating Agencies Foster Youth Educational Support Program, is its legislative name. A few years back, the Chancellor's Office worked with an agency to do a rebranding process, and so now the program is called Next Up. And so a lot of times you hear people use those two terms interchangeably. However, the formal name legislatively is KFES, and the program name that college people use and that we use is Next Up. Next slide, please. Next Up is a supplemental program housed within the EOPS program. And I think the original decision to house the program within EOPS was based on the fact that EOPS offers a comparable case management model, and then also because of the strong infrastructure and outcomes that were already established within the EOPS program. The goal of Next Up is to provide needed supports to current and former foster youth so they can be successful at community college and beyond. We started the program in 2014 with 26 campuses and then expanded in 2018, and we're now at 45 colleges throughout the state. Next slide, please. Next Up can provide a wide variety of supports. This isn't an exhaustive list, but those supports can include counseling, educational planning services, career guidance, assistance with food, housing, transportation, child care, and other basic need resources. Next Up staff should work with the youth to determine what they need in order to stay on track academically and personally. It's important, this is an important thing that I always like to emphasize, that Next Up staff coordinate with financial aid, the financial aid department on your campus, to make sure that whenever you're giving students direct aid like grants or gift cards, that you coordinate with the financial aid folks to make sure that what the students ultimately receive doesn't exceed the total cost of attendance as determined by financial aid. The reason why it's so important is because if the student receives too much, then they could be on the hook for paying money back. Next slide, please. As many of you know, in addition to Next Up, there's a number of other foster youth support programs on your campuses. And these include the Foster Youth Success Initiative, which was really birthed out of financial aid many, many years ago. Some campuses have the SILP program, there's Guardian Scholar programs, Renaissance Scholar programs. There's a lot of different names for the foster youth support programs, and some of these programs may be funded through equity or through outside partners. Regardless, the strongest Next Up programs, and you'll hear from your colleagues from the field, are those that collaborate with other foster youth campus support programs by creating a continuum of support to ensure that all youth on campus are getting served. This is really especially true in light of the Guided Pathways movement, and Guided Pathways, which is happening across the community college system, is really being promoted by the Chancellor's Office, really from the very top tier of management, is about serving all students and putting the students at the center of everything that we all do. It's about breaking down silos to make sure that everyone gets served. Next slide, please. So on that front, we know that not all youth will be eligible for Next Up services or resources. So all students should be screened for eligibility and should be referred to other available services. In 2017, through Assembly Bill 12, It was established that Next Step funding could be used to screen students for eligibility and to refer ineligible students to other available services both on and off campus. On this note of collaboration, collaborating with external stakeholders will be critical to getting students in your program. Getting a list of identified youth from financial aid and from admissions and records is a good place to start, but working with external partners will be essential to really having robust programs. Partners should include the K-12 schools and school districts, independent living program providers, group homes, county child welfare, and probation departments. The goal is to maximize the number of youth in your programs and ultimately to maximize the level of support and resources that the youth can receive. Next slide, please. Just some general information about student eligibility. Youth must have established residency within California and qualify for a BOG fee waiver, which is now known as the California College Promise Grant, with an expected family contribution of 0. It's important to support the youth to establish residency as they need it to participate in Next Step, and they also need it to maximize the amount of financial aid that they'll get. Some youth do not have permanent physical addresses. This should not prohibit them from being able to establish residency. It's going to be important that you work closely with your A&R. And if you come up with some significant challenges working with with A&R, then please reach out and we'll see what we can do to help. Next slide, please. Other eligibility criteria: the youth have to have been in care on or after their 16th birthday, be under the age of 26 at the beginning of the academic school year, and be enrolled in a minimum of 9 units. If, due to life circumstances, the youth needs to drop some of those 9 units after they've already gone through the application and acceptance process, they're eligible to remain in the program. Ideally, Next Step staff, you guys will work with the students to help them increase their course load if they in fact had to drop courses. It is worth noting that youth in the juvenile justice system who have court-ordered out-of-home placements, they're also eligible for Next Step. We found that sometimes this is a confusing topic for both college staff and for the youth. Youth may not know or be familiar with the term court-ordered out-of-home placement. So you may need to confer with probation staff to determine if the youth does in fact have a court-ordered out-of-home placement. It's a possibility that maybe we'll do a learning session on juvenile justice involved youth. Next slide, please. In terms of verification, there's a number of ways to verify if a youth was in foster care after their 16th birthday. You can verify with financial aid to see if they're receiving a Chafee grant. You can check with A&R to see if they've received priority registration per their foster youth status. You can also accept a letter or a postcard from the county staff verifying the dates that the youth was in care. And for youth who are no longer in care, they can call or email the Foster Youth Ombudsman's office. It is not something that Next Step staff can do independently of the youth, but you, Next Step staff, and the youth, and really any other foster youth support program person, can sit with the youth and call the Ombudsman's office to get that verification. Next slide, please. The important thing to remember around the verification process: verifying that the youth was in care after the age of 16 should not become problematic for the youth. Youth should never have to provide verification to multiple campuses, multiple departments on campus. They should never be required to go back to the court to get court papers, or they should not be required to track down old social workers to get verification. And unfortunately, we have heard of scenarios like these. Next Step staff should assist the youth if they're having a hard time providing verification. The larger goal here is to screen students in, not screen them out. Next slide, please. On a similar note, ideally colleges will streamline the EOPS Next Step application and orientation processes. youth shouldn't have to complete separate applications to participate in EOPS and Next Up. Colleges should create a single application that captures all the information needed for both programs. And we can provide some samples on the website for colleges who don't already have a single application. Similarly, colleges should offer joint orientation sessions, meaning the youth gets oriented to both EOPS and Next Up at the same time during the same session. Requiring double paperwork and multiple orientations is time consuming, and really it's inefficient for both the staff and for the youth. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, if the youth needs to drop some of their units, they're still eligible to stay in the program. There's also special provisions for youth regarding maintaining satisfactory academic progress. Youth should not be disqualified for not having met SAP. Ideally, staff can work with the youth if they're not meeting SAP to identify what's going on that is disrupting their academic progress. It's the same consideration is applicable for the BOG fee waiver, known as the California Promise Grant. They shouldn't lose their BOG fee waiver after one semester of not meeting SAP. Again, the goal is to provide necessary support, including tutoring, multiple in-person contacts, and ongoing educational planning to ensure that the youth are staying on track. So that's just a brief overview of eligibility and just a few best practices. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Flo Charlie from Sierra College, who's going to go into greater depth around the strategies that they employ to recruit and get youth into their program.
Thank you, Colleen. All right, so again, my name is Flo Charlie, as Colleen mentioned. Today I'll be giving out at least 7 techniques and strategies that Sierra College uses for outreach and recruitment. Next slide, please. So just to give a little background about the foster youth services available to students attending Sierra College, we do have a Guardian Scholars program that started back in 2015, and then 2006, the Next Up program. So as you see here on the table, the differences in qualifications, a lot you just heard from Colleen regarding Next Up. And then the Guardian Scholars. So the Guardian Scholars program at Sierra College, we do not have an age limit. So students can be 35 and participate in the program. They don't have to be in care, a day past their 13th birthday, as long as they provide us with the documentation, a foster care verification document. We will serve them in the Guardian Scholars program. The Next Up program, again, you've just heard all of the requirements from Colleen. So we do serve students both in Guardian Scholars and Next Up. At Sierra College, we consider all foster youth students with foster care verifications as Guardian Scholars. Next Up is just another level of support for all students that qualify in those criteria. Next slide, please. So the first strategy that I would like to share with all of you is pretty much the ground root of how all of this started for Sierra College. And it really started back when the Foster Youth Success Initiative started. When that came about, there was no funding, and folks on Sierra College campus, as well as the region and state, wanted to do something and want to know more about the student population. So folks at Sierra College at the time got together, EOPS one especially, because they were in contact and engaging with a lot of students with foster care experience and again with financial aid. So they came together and then along with the region created, with partnership with the Foster Youth Success Initiatives at the Foundation Office, created a kickoff event. I don't know if it was technically called a kickoff, but that's kind of how it started. From there, they identified their key partners on campus to help these students. And back then, I think they've identified, EOPS for sure, financial aid for sure, admissions of records, and then our housing. Sierra College does have dorms, on-campus housing. So they identified them as well. and then our college foundation office to kind of put the word out in the community for funding to help support resources for these students because there was really no funding available. Again, with this kickoff, they hosted and then reached out to the community partners. Who can they have come to the campus to educate them about foster youth experiences and what they could do on the college campus to help meet their needs. After they identified those potential community agencies and partners, they had this kickoff where they all came together and pretty much just sat around round tables and just giving them information, college giving our community agencies information about the campus, how the enrollment process works, and then our community partners educating our colleges about what happens on their side of the fence. So, and then how to identify foster youth students. What are the documents? What does it look like? Next slide, please. From that kickoff, I think, is how it all started for Sierra College. Based off of that, our college met our community partners and our agencies and decided, to keep it ongoing, keep a monthly meeting ongoing to kind of bring all of us together, to share with one another what's happening, and kind of case managing different cases of students and their needs, what resources are available on our campuses and what resources are available off campus. So for Sierra College, we wanted to build and create our community, having it be a strong community. So on campus at Sierra College, folks who are part of our on-campus community are folks from the Department of Equity and Student Engagement, all of our guardian staff and Next Step staff, so coordinators, counselors, counseling assistant, financial aid technician, of course, our EOPS partners, our on-campus housing, as I mentioned, and in our Sierra College foster and kinship care, or KingGAP, our foundation office, and of course, admissions and records. Next slide. And then our community partners are our main key supporters that helps bring in our students. These are some of the ones that I've identified, but we have so many. As many as you know, working with these students, there's no one shoe fit all. So you want to get as many resources and tools that you can possibly get to, but these are the basics as you are looking into creating your community. ILP services within your county, you may want to reach out to them. In our campus, we have our ILP here in Placer County and Nevada County because Sierra College have a campus at Nevada County. Transitional housing, you want those folks on board. County Office of Education, foster youth services would probably be one of the best community partners you might want to have on your list because they have the information of students who are currently in their system coming into your college campuses. In addition to that, they have direct connection, most likely, to your probation officers, to your placement social workers, to everyone. So as long as the information about your college and your services go out to this place, they can then dismantle all the information to them. This morning, I participated in one of the meetings hosted by our Placer County Office of Education, and all of these county partners were there. And Sierra College Guardian Scholars information and Next Step information was in the resource guide. So everyone there received that. So that's one way you can get your information out about your program. And then again, don't forget educational, a job, employment, the CASAs, which are the court-appointed special advocates, because they're working with these youth as well, and then child advocate attorney if you can get, and probation officers. Next slide. Something that we started when we initially started the Guardian Scholars Program is students can self-identify themselves as being in the foster care system through the CCC Apply. So we met with our admissions and records and their IIT and created an automated email that gets sent out to every student who self-identify through the CCC Apply. And the email that automatically gets sent out to the students who mark a yes on that box is pretty much kind of introducing ourselves and saying, hey, based on you identifying yourself as foster youth through the CCC Apply, we want to let you know that we have a program that can serve you. And then the information about our programs and who to contact. As you see there on the slide, this is one of the replies back from one of the students who did receive that email that says, hey, my name is her name, or his or her name. I just applied through the application process and I got this email saying that I could qualify for the Guardian Scholars. So students will also reply back to that email as well. That's something that can be easy to do, but again, CCC Apply, self-identify, and then an automated email gets sent out to these students. Next slide, please. Another biggie is, of course, students self-identifying through the FAFSA application or the Chafee application. At Sierra College, we have our own Guardian Scholars, next up, financial aid technician. And the beauty around that is all information regarding financial aid, foster youth students come to her. And so then she will reach out to these individuals who identified as foster youth on the FAFSA application or have been verified through the Chafee application. And she'll reach out to them by phone or by email, giving them information about our Guardian Scholars program and our next step. Financial aid office does clear our students for priority registration. So if any student did not self-identify but would like to take part in the priority registration, we'll bring a document to our financial aid office to clear them for priority registration, and that's another way for us to capture them to give them information about our programs. Our financial aid office technician does go out into outreach to different high schools on outreach day events for financial aid, so to help all these financial aid students about their high school students about their financial aid. She, give a little spiel out there about the Guardian Scholars program and those who may qualify by being in the foster care system. So some students will be captured by that and self-disclose to her that they are or have been in foster care in the past. Next slide, please. Our fourth strategy is active in-reach and outreach presentations. I've given presentations at full-time and part-time counseling trainings because oftentimes some students would self-disclose during their counseling appointments. They will walk them right over to our office, presenting and showing up for the County Office of Education meetings and being present. Our foster care kinship care services, collaborating with them. Our local foster care placements, like our THP programs, ILP programs. We've gone out and give information on one of their nights, which is their college night or transition night. We will go out and kind of give them information about our program and what the process looks like. Our financial aid technicians also go out and give them information about financial aid. We've gone out and did tables at our CASA orientation events. And then we've done many different community outreach in different spaces, such as churches or Optimist programs and the City Council. A lot of those spaces, though, are from our county, some college foundation office. They go out to talk about our programs to gain more resources to help support our students. Next slide, please. Another strategy is we host Guardian Scholars Next Up info sessions throughout the year, and we've kind of pre-scheduled those sessions and share those dates out to the different events that we go to make sure that students or folks are aware. It is open to all, so prospective students are welcome, providers are welcome, supporters are welcome, parents are welcome, and it's about an hour-long info session where folks are welcome to come. They do have to confirm with us that they will be attending so we know how much people are planning on showing up. We give them information about our programs that most of our foster youth students will qualify for, give them information about financial aid, first-year college programs, Guardian Scholars Next Up, EOPS, our disability services, and then our on-campus housing. And then after that, we give them a college tour to kind of get them, get to see the campus and see where they are on campus and kind of get them comfortable. So again, info sessions will be another great way to get folks to come in and check out your campus and your programs. Next slide, please. As Colleen mentioned earlier in her presentation, the collaboration between and among programs that serves our students, we've done something like that. We've kind of came together, the EOPS program, the Guardian Scholars, and TRIO now have a common application or program application. So it's really just one application that students fill out, and they will mark on there they're interested in EOPS, TRIO, or Guardian Scholars. And on that application, we have questions to kind of see where students are, what their status are in terms of foster youth. So if a student marked that they have foster care experience, our EOPS coordinator will then know to connect with me to make sure that we are looking at this student to see if we can serve them in EOPS or just Guardian Scholars only, or if the student can be in both, and the same thing goes for TRIO. So again, it's one application that students fill out so that they're not filling out one Guardian Scholars application and then EOPS application. The EOPS application is also for the Next Step program. So all of that is in one application. And the program, again, invites for students to self-identify if they've been in the foster care system. Next slide, please. And our last one is, a part of the plan that with the guided pathways for Sierra College, we have hired transition counselors who are in the high schools and help our students with the enrollment process. We do have one particular transitional counselor who works with our non-traditional high schools. So this is a person that goes out into our continuation schools and actually goes into one of our group home schools. And so we work very closely with this counselor to get their students that she's working with at the high school level to connect with one of us once they're on board or once they're fully on the campus. She has a lot of information about our program, and so that she can also give those information out to our students. Sometimes the barrier for our students to get to us in advance is transportation. So this way, it's actually helping us a lot by our counselor going to them into their spaces and having all of that taken care of, and then providing us any information or asking us any questions that can help the student. Next slide, please. But again, a quick recap of those 7 strategies. 1, build your community. However way you want to do it. For us, it started off with a kickoff that brought all the different community partners and stakeholders as well as Sierra College together to create a pathway for students and way for us to help one another, and especially for our students. Second one is we have an automated email that goes out to our students who self-identify through CCC Apply. We worked with our admissions and records for that. 3, work with our financial aid technician to identify those who marked foster youth or foster care experience in FAFSA or Chafee application. 4, be there and be present, be able to give out different presentations about your program on campus and off campus. 5, we ongoing on-campus info sessions to invite any and all. Collaborate with similar student support groups such as EOPS, TRIO, CalWorks, DSPS. And then our last is Sierra College's high school liaisons who are actually in campus on high school campuses. That's it for me. I will now introduce Veronica Salmeron Souza from Fresno City College, who will share her recruitment strategies with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Flo. Hi there, I'm Veronica Salmeron Souza. I am the coordinator and counselor with Fresno City College Next Up program, which of course is a part of the EOPNS program as a whole. Next slide, please. I really did want to start talking about one of our main recruitment strategies. It's our EOPNS orientation. And EOPNS orientation is something that we do because it's necessary for our particular program and the amount of students that we have coming into the EOPNS program. Currently, EOPNS has 2,063 students, so we have a pretty large, robust program here at Fresno City College. Of those EOPNS students, about 92 were Next Up students, and that was for last semester. Of course, my numbers right now aren't in as far as how many students I'm going to be having this semester or as a year in total, but I anticipate having more than 100 students this particular year for Next Up. So why orientation? What is the reason for that? I'm not really sure if all colleges have an orientation for EOP&S. I suspect not all of them do, but for us, again, it is necessary. And it's necessary for several reasons. We want consistent information given to our students about the program, about the services that we provide for them. Also, to be able to provide clear expectations of the program. And for the students themselves to know what they're getting themselves into per our contract with them. And of course, like I mentioned before, it's necessary for the size of the group. Although I'm sure we'd love to have individual orientations in order to be able to get to know each student individually, it's quite impossible for the size of students that we have. Next slide, please. So one of the main questions that I've received is, how do you get those particular students into the EOP&S orientation? And again, I say that EOP&S orientation is one of our recruitment strategies for Next Up because it's already an identified pool of students that are eligible for EOP&S. So we don't have to worry about the basics that you do when you first get a fresh student. So again, the question was, how do you get students into the EOP&S orientation? Well, Mark McNiff, one of our program specialists who works for Next Up as well as EOP&S, he has developed a number of relationships with outside community stakeholders. You've heard Flo talk about some of the stakeholders at her table, and I would gather to bet that they're pretty much the same ones that we have at our table. With those developed relationships, it really does allow open communication about the number of students that will possibly be attending Fresno City College or any of our sister campuses such as Reedley, Clovis, Oakhurst, or Madera. And so by having those relationships already established, again, opens the lines of communication. So for Mark, he begins getting a list of all students that will possibly be coming to Fresno City College. And we're talking about in the thousands because it's all over Fresno County proper. He gets that list pretty much in April, maybe a little earlier, and he spends a few months looking through that list, deciding which students are the most needy. So from there, of course, he gets that information from district liaisons, he gets them from the superintendent of schools, and really, again, the question is, how do you get those students? Well, because of those existing contacts, we're able to get those particular names of students. For those of you that don't have those existing contacts, and I wanted to speak briefly about that. I know some schools who are on the line might say, you know, I don't know any of my district liaisons. I don't know who the superintendent of schools is. Well, take a look at the people that you do know currently and see if they know someone. So perhaps picking up the phone and calling a friend that you used to work with before, or someone that you know is closely connected to someone at the county level. That's really where you begin that first step of making those contacts. If that doesn't work for you, perhaps reaching out to the independent living program. More than likely, they have educational liaisons that work directly with the schools already, and so perhaps they can connect you. If you yourself can't reach out to the independent living program for whatever reason, perhaps your program is not a robust program in that particular county, perhaps you can go ahead and reach out to a foster family agency who has a number of connections not only to the social services area, but also perhaps educational liaisons that foster family agencies work with directly because of shared individual students or students on their caseload. So those are some ideas how you can take that first step in trying to get to those district liaisons in trying to develop this list that I've been speaking about. Next slide, please. So for some of our students that come into the EOP&S orientation, contact began in high school. So again, Mark does receive that list. He combs through it for a few months, again, because there are thousands on that list. And he really just chooses those that are most in need, that would probably fit within our EOP&S criteria. And when I say most in need, I'm really speaking to our population, our foster youth population. Of course, some of our undocumented students as well, our homeless individuals, and also perhaps our students that are unaccompanied minors. So those are the ones we really focus on. We actually go through the steps of sending out a personal invitation. So right before graduation, they are sent a personal invitation from our office that's delivered in hand by the school liaisons. And so students really, I'm hoping, get a feel that we really want them to be a part of EOP&S. And those invitations are also important because they also invite the student to our actual EOP&S orientations that start occurring in June. So right after they graduate, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, they're already called to come in to an orientation and hear about our program. Next slide, please. So again, at the EOP&S orientation, because we have so many students and the information we want to give is consistent, the information includes information about Next Up. And so just in case we missed any students that perhaps were foster youth, we go ahead and announce Next Up information and eligibility requirements during that time in hopes to capture more students. During each orientation, each student is also asked to fill out some paperwork, and during that paperwork, that question is asked again as far as foster youth status. And we pull those applications and they're handed directly to me. Now, I really try my hardest to be at all EOP&S orientations, or at least try to be on campus, just in case we do have a student that is targeted and we find out about them. I can go ahead and make a face-to-face connection with them. And that's really important, I think, for this particular population, that they really do have a face or even just an office to go to. So if they see me in my office, they may not remember my name, they may not even remember my face, but more than likely they'll remember my office. So if we don't get them into the program for that particular semester, they can come a little bit later on their own, perhaps, when they are ready. We also have an open enrollment for EOP&S that does not come directly from the high school pool. This is an on-campus open enrollment for EOP&S. It happens twice a year, usually in May and December. It's a one-day open enrollment for all students who are here on campus. Students start lining up at 7 a.m. And they line up because sometimes our program is at capacity, so we have very limited amount of numbers that we can actually fill. This particular semester, we only had, I believe, 100 open slots, and so we had a number of students sign up, or I should say, sign in their application and turn it in that morning. Again, I try my hardest to be here that particular day, just in case we do get a foster youth who comes in through that door, and I like to make that face-to-face connection with them so we can get the ball rolling for them, because they may not know about Next Up at that point. Next slide, please. Another item that we look at for recruitment is really meeting face-to-face with the student in their high school area. And so we do have close connections, again, with our district liaisons. So whenever our usual college outreach team goes out, our college relations team, they will go out, they actually have begun already, and they go out to every high school. We actually accompany them if we can. And while they're on campus meeting with students who are seniors getting ready to possibly come to our district, once we identify who the foster youth are, we meet them face-to-face. So they already have a contact not only with their district liaison, they have a contact with us as their on-campus counselor, and also we get this opportunity to tell them about the program and let them decide whether or not they're going to be joining us on campus. Next slide, please. The second large recruitment strategy that we have is the Access to Higher Education events. Now, this is a collaboration between many stakeholders. It's been going on for a few years now. Some of you may have already heard about our Access to Higher Education events, because it's something that we really have highlighted, and I'm hoping that other colleges have taken the information and made it their own. The event starts with, again, collaboration and planning with a number of entities, ranging from the superintendent of schools, including the foster youth liaisons, our independent living program, the foster county education liaisons, county probation, and other school district staff, including our district campuses that I've mentioned before. But that also includes our district staff, such as our catering program here on campus, or our parking program here on campus. The reality is that it does take a village to make this particular event get off the ground and be successful. Next slide, please. So our Access to Higher Education really is an opportunity for us to showcase college in general. It just so happens that it is on our campus. But even if it doesn't stay on our campus, the event would still look the same and hopefully have the same result. It starts off with breakfast, which is great for our students. They love coming to eat, and I would say that that's a carrot we like to dangle quite frequently. Students are invited through invitation, whether it's verbal or in hand. Awareness for this particular event is dispersed through the independent living program as well and on campus with their particular schools. And of course, we advertise it here in our office. It is directed primarily to our 9th through 12th graders. So it is a high school event. And so students come on campus early on the morning. They have breakfast. They are bused here from their school. It is a school activity, so they would need permission slips to be able to participate and be doing well in school. We do discourage group homes dropping off their students on their own or foster parents just walking the student on campus. We do really want to tie it to school to make it very much about academics. Right after breakfast, we do have a keynote speaker, which is actually something new for this particular event. We tried it and students loved it, so we will continue doing that. After the keynote speaker, we go into highlighting a particular department. So every year, as a committee, we sit down and decide what we really want to bring to the table for our students who are on campus to showcase the different programs here on campus. And so in the past, we've done robotics, we've done CAD camp, we've done automotive, allied health, including our rad tech departments and our nursing departments. This last year, we decided to focus on fine arts. So we had a number of fine arts areas highlight their work, ranging from guitar to choreographed dance to sculpture. And so students were able to really take a look at that particular part of the campus. We also have a little piece of the day dedicated to really showcase or answer questions, I should say, about college itself. So we do dedicate some time to be able to have students explore some of the things that need to be done before they come to college, whether that's A through G requirements or financial aid, or just get to know the campus itself and what programs the campus is able to provide. So that is something that we work into the schedule as well. And I would say probably the most successful part of the day, if I were a student, I would say would be the social emotional lunchtime. So that, of course, is lunch. Again, food is the primary consideration there. But we also have time for students to be able to just have a good time with each other. Some of these students haven't seen each other because they've moved around from foster homes or from school. So they're able to reconnect during this particular time. And it just really is a nice ending to the day. Two other things that we include in the day are our peer mentors, and you'll see, if you're looking at your screen, you'll see a picture of some of our peer mentors that are mentoring for the day. I always ask my students if they are willing to participate during these events. That way students can see that it is possible for them to come to school. Despite where they live or what their situation is, there are people that are able to come to school and be successful. And then, of course, we offer a campus tour so students become more familiar with the school and just are more comfortable when they finally show up on that first day. Next slide, please. So our high school Access to Higher Education event may or may not result in a Next Step student. So we do invest a lot of time, and our stakeholders who primarily pay for the event do invest a lot of money in the event. But we all agree that even if it does not lead to a Next Step student, the amount of time and money invested is well worth it. Because again, it does expose the student to a campus. And again, it is our campus, but it doesn't necessarily have to be our campus. And so just exposure to a college campus perhaps will lead to the student wanting to come to a campus even if it's not ours. Exposure to Next Step staff and program. So we do this on a 4-year rotation. So we have a student that starts in 9th grade. They might be possible that they come in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. So we've seen them a total of 4 times before they even come to Fresno City College or Reedley or Clovis as a student. And so, again, it's really about how you define success. And if a student decides to come just because he knows your face and you're familiar, that, I think, is a success for us. Next slide, please. We also do have another Access to Higher Education event called Extreme Registration. And now this particular event is focused on 12th graders. So high school seniors are invited to Extreme Registration. Again, the identification does not come from us when it comes to who's going to be attending. It does come from the educational liaisons and district school staff. And so once they have developed the list and decided which students are seniors and would possibly be a good fit for this particular event, they make the arrangements to have the student come to campus on this particular day. Our next one is happening quite soon. It will happen on April 3rd, so we're very much into the planning stages of that particular event. So again, many of the students are already familiar with Next Up staff because they have seen us in 9th grade, they've seen us in 10th grade, they've seen us in 11th grade. They're going to see us again, and they probably will see us this month when we go visit them on campus. So the familiarity is there. So we're hoping that will increase their or lessen their reluctance to come. The whole goal of the day for this particular event is to have the student fully matriculated by the time they leave for the day. So that includes doing an orientation. Every student that comes to school here needs to have an orientation, and it's a general orientation about what services are available here on campus. So we're able to do that as a group. They are fully enrolled in classes, so they have a full class load by the time they leave. Financial aid has partnered with us for these events, and so they create an individualized packet for each student that's going to come. So I hand the names over right before the event, and they create folders of whatever forms each student needs, so that way they can fill those forms out. And so I do say financial aid is taken care of, but also say that hesitantly because most of the time it's not really all taken care of. There's still a few more steps that have to be done. And of course, we deal with that when the student comes on campus for us. We do provide some time for the student to hear about Next Up and fill out a Next Up application if that is their desire. We do not force a student to fill out a Next Up application if they feel that they do not want to be a part of the program. But again, I'm not really sure why a student wouldn't want to be a part of the program, but we leave it up to them. And so again, the whole goal of the day is to have them fully matriculated. So by the time they leave, and this is one of the best things about it, again, our program specialist, Mark McNiff, will get up in front of everyone and just say, hey, you are now a full-fledged college student. And the amount of pride that is in that room is just incredibly overwhelming. We are planning some retreats as part of the Access to Higher Education Next Step. And the reason for that is because we were seeing a decline in students who were attending the April 3rd event. We saw that they were not coming on campus in August. And so we felt that we needed to develop a way to keep them interested in our program and interested to our particular campus. And so this particular year, we're going to be dedicating some time to provide some retreats for those particular students as a way of outreach in hopes that we'll be able to see them and just remind them that we're here right after they graduate in June and then sometime in July. Next slide, please. And the last recruitment strategy for us that really was more of a surprise than anything was the hiring of peer mentors. Last April, I was able to hire on 3 peer mentors who worked together here with me on campus to really raise awareness to our program and work together on some items. Unfortunately, 2 of my peer mentors, or I should say fortunately, because they did move on to greener pastures. One graduated, is at Fresno State, and the other actually got hired on in another position, a higher level position here on campus. So quite proud of that. So I have one peer mentor, and her name is Suki. And she has been really assisting me in recruiting for Next Up, and we surely did not expect it, but we're very happy about the result of hiring her. So again, one of the questions that I'm frequently asked as far as peer mentors are concerned is, how did you identify a peer mentor? How did you get that started? Well, I was very lucky. Fresno Unified School District was hiring mentors for a particular program that they had, aiming at providing supportive services to foster youth in high school. And it just so happened that these 3 peer mentors, Suki included, decided that they wanted to do that. So it was surely by luck that I was able to get peer mentors that were already trained as peer mentors through Fresno Unified School District. And so that was incredibly helpful. As I mentioned before, many of the activities that we have or events that we have here on campus, I do invite all my students to participate. They come wearing their Next Up shirts. We have a few meetings beforehand as far as what's going to happen during the day and the expectation. And so those students that show up and volunteer their time are really those students that I focus on because they're doing it for free. So if they're volunteering and mentoring for free, why not pay them some money to do it? And so it just so happened that my three students that I actually ended up hiring were the ones that would always show up and volunteer repeatedly. And they were the ones that would follow through. So I would say be there at 8 and they would be there maybe at 8:05, but they would be there. So that's how I was able to identify peer mentors. Next, I needed to make sure that I was prepared for a peer mentor. And that not only included paying, I did run into a little bit of a problem in which I wanted to hire my students on through federal work study, but it was severely affecting their unmet needs. And although they would have eventually received all the funds through federal work study, I really wanted them to be able to receive other services like our meal and gas cards, like our grants that our school does provide for our Next Up students. So I looked at our budget and I decided to write it into our Next Up budget. So my peer mentor currently receives her funds through, it's a budget item and it's not federal work study. So it does not affect her unmet need, but it does in a roundabout way in that she does need to report that to financial aid later. I also provide a number of training opportunities for these students. Again, they were trained through Fresno Unified School District, but I wanted to continue that training modality in that I did see them as actual staff, and staff I believe have to be trained quite frequently as far as keeping up on what the current tone of what our school is wanting to have when it comes to delivered services. So Suki does frequently go to trainings that I link her to, including going to foster youth training summits and educational opportunities for her to learn a little bit more. I also provide a learning agreement for her. I really wanted to make sure that the time that was spent with her and by herself, because quite frequently I am busy, I really want to make sure that she's just not doing busy work, that she really is expanding her knowledge. So we have a fluid learning agreement document in which she identifies what she wants to learn, and I, of course, lay out my expectations for her. And it just makes both of us it just makes things a little more clear for both of us as far as what our expectations are of each other. And then, of course, regular check-ins. Suki does come in to check in with me every day. Most of the time, it's a hi-bye because we are so busy here in the office, but I dedicate one time a week for about an hour to just sit and check with her to make sure that I am providing the support that she needs and that she knows exactly what she needs to be doing as far as what assignments I've given her. So in terms of assignments, I want to speak a little bit about what her role is. I do want her to be incredibly visible to our students. So not only to our current Next Up students, but any Next Up students that might be kind of floating around on campus that have maybe not heard of our program or have heard of our program but are just taking their time making their way in. And so I do have Suki stationed all around the campus. She spends some time in the cafeteria, she spends some time in the tutorial center, in the library, and here in our office. So she kind of bounces around. It is very helpful that she does have the Remind app, and I put her as an administrator to that Remind app. So she lets students know every day what her time is going to be like as far as when she's going to be on campus and where she's going to be on campus. That way students can drop in. I really do see Suki as an extension of myself. And so whenever students can't come in to see me, they can go directly to Suki and ask her certain questions. And that's so important. The check-in is incredibly important because she might receive some questions that she may not be prepared to answer or find herself in some situations because a student has shared something very, very personal with her. And so having that time for her to check in with me just to make sure that she's not handling more than she should be handling. And so again, she does use the Remind app to send out reminders. She is also in charge of our workshops. So we do have workshops that we call meetups, We have them twice a month. We serve food, and students are able to get information about on-campus resources and off-campus resources. And so she is in charge of those as in conjunction with our intern that we have this semester. And I believe they're going to be having a workshop tomorrow on interpersonal communication. So she's pretty excited about that. I also utilize Suki as a feedback source. And so whenever I'm thinking about making a change in the program, or students are having a hard time with something and I just can't figure out what I'm doing wrong, I really do utilize Suki as a go-to person to ask, hey, what's your youth perspective? Because I hate to admit this, but I'm not green around the gills anymore. I wish I were sometimes. But she can go ahead and provide that feedback because she speaks directly to the students in a way that I sometimes cannot because of my time or just because of my the generational gap that I have with my students. And again, kind of along the same lines, she is our youth voice. And so I frequently invite her to our advisory boards, not only EOP&S, but also Next Up advisory boards. So that way we can have a youth voice there at the table. And again, a majority of the time when I do make changes about the program, I do utilize her feedback first before I make that change. And at this point, I am utilizing Suki as well as the previous youth mentors for an awareness campaign called Photo Voice. In this particular project, both Suki and all three of my students, my peer mentors, current and former, have taken pictures of their college experience, and they have also captioned those pictures in hopes to raise the awareness of a college youth experience here on campus. And so we're getting ready to launch that and have a small little get-together to just showcase that work in hopes that we can raise more awareness here on campus and out in the community about our program and about the fact that foster youth do want to attend college. And at this point, I'm also having Suki work on another project that does aim to prepare others who want to be mentors. So she's working in collaboration with myself to provide some workshops on whether or not a student wants to be a mentor and how to be a mentor. That way, when she moves on to the next stage in her education, I can already have some students that are groomed to fill her place. It will be quite difficult, but hopefully together her and I can make that happen. So. Next slide. Great. And Debbie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of our presenters. If folks have questions, this is now the time for Q&A. So please go ahead and send any questions you might have through the questions panel on your control panel. But before we get to Q&A, I just wanted to share about some other webinars that are coming up that you might be interested in. So tomorrow we have a webinar about the California Earned Income Tax Credit. So we're really excited about this. This is something that changed in the budget last year. There's millions of new dollars available for young people that was not available previously. So if you want to learn about how to get more cash into the pockets of the youth you serve, join us for that webinar tomorrow. On January 31st, we are doing a webinar about bridging the gap between college campuses and the youth homelessness response system, known as the Continuum of Care. So we're also very excited about that and connecting those resources to college campuses. And then next month in February, we're doing a three-part series on the 7th, 14th, and 21st, where we're going to walk through the three different bills that we're working on here at JBA for the year ahead. So there's a link there on the screen. If you go to the JBA for Youth website, you'll see a menu item that says upcoming webinars. If you click on that, the links are there for you to be able to register for any of these webinars. Next slide. So we're now going to go ahead and go into the Q&A portion. So we did get a couple questions early on for Colleen related to the eligibility piece. So the first question for you, Colleen, is that students who are in Next Up are waived from the 70-unit maximum requirement that applies for students in EOPS. Given this, is it still mandatory to have students turn in transcripts from all former colleges before they can be admitted?
Thank you, Debbie. So it is fine to request the transcripts from the other colleges, though because the 70-unit cap is not applicable, it really has no bearing on the student's eligibility. So if the EOPS practice, which it is to request those transcripts, that's fine, but it shouldn't impact the youth's participation in Next Up.
Great. Another question. So somebody just wants to confirm that if a student is verified by financial aid as being eligible for the Chafee grant program, not CAFES, but Chafee, is that verification enough to deem a student eligible for Next Up, or would Next Up have to do further verification?
No, if the student has been verified that they are Chafee eligible or receiving a Chafee grant, that is enough verification for purposes of Next Up.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. If a student is verified as independent or paid, which is based on a different age criteria, it's based on being in care after the age of 13, would that be enough verification, or would there have to be different verification?
The verification has to be that the youth was in care on or after their 16th birthday. So being identified as an independent student isn't enough verification. It needs to be a form of verification that indicates that the student was in care on or after their 16th birthday.
Great. Okay, I have a couple questions here for Flo. So one person wants to know, with your Guardian Scholars Program, because your Guardian Scholars Program, as I understand it, is for students who might not necessarily qualify for Next Up. Do you serve students in that program who are in guardianship?
In guardianship, as long as they were in foster care placement prior to going into guardianship. So we have some students who were in foster care briefly, maybe for 2 or 3 months, and then went into adoption or went into guardianship. That will qualify them, but just solely an agreement between family members and then went into guardianship that way, that would not qualify you for foster care placement or Guardian Scholars. Thank you. Great.
So then I have a question about, you mentioned that you have a person in the financial aid office that does outreach. How did you go about getting the financial aid office to designate this person to be in this role? And is that person's staff time paid for in part by Next Up, or are they 100% paid for through financial aid?
So our financial aid technician is actually a Guardian Scholars financial aid technician and Next Up. So her position is paid for by Student Equity, who funds the Guardian Scholars program and Next Up. So it's in partnership with Equity and Next Up funding to support the one full-time Guardian Scholars program technician / financial aid technician.
Great. And then you talked about your info sessions that you do monthly. How do people find out about the info sessions? How do you go about advertising those?
In terms of advertising it, all the different meetings that we attend in county, we have a lot of different, people just email us when they find out about our Guardian Scholars program via our website, see our college website, and so we will send them out information. A lot of the different placement agencies that we work with, they will get the information and then they will share the information to their colleagues. And that's how really the word spreads out. We participate in our ILP, in our our Placer County Office of Education and Nevada County Office of Education. So we dismantle the information through them and the Sacramento. So we're a part of a lot of big meetings that host a lot of different people from different agencies, and they get the information from us through those meetings, and they share those out to their folks. So that's how, and we have created partnership with folks from out of our county. So we have Contra Costa County, who constantly brings students. San Diego also brings students to our campus every year. And those folks, we have a listserv that we will email out. Okay, upcoming year coming up, these are the dates that we've identified and the times that we have identified for our Guardian Scholars info sessions. And if those dates don't work, we ask them to give us dates that do work for their programs and their students, and we will accommodate.
Great. So I have one more question for you before I move on to Veronica. So is the Guardian Scholars Program Coordinator and Next Step Coordinator one person? And if so, how did this develop?
Yes, our at Sierra College, the Guardian Scholars coordinator and the Next Step Coordinator is one person. That's me. And how did this develop? So initially, we had the Next Step program being coordinated under the EOPS, and so our EOPS coordinator was coordinating Next Step in partnership with myself. And then just this past year, we've decided to just merge into one person, and that would be me, since the Guardian Scholars is a point of entry to all programs, and I serve as the Next Step counselor and Guardian Scholars counselors for the continuity piece. We've decided to do it that way and just host it all in one versus me going back and forth with the EOPS coordinator. But we do definitely still collaborate on who, because Next Up is still housed under EOPS, and making sure that we don't affect any regulations or guidelines within the EOPS. So we do coordinate still, but a lot of the decisions within terms of direct services or what do we do, that's just Next Up, because all that information, the students, if they lose eligibility for Next Up for whatever reason, they maintain Guardian Scholar services regardless. They're never kicked out of the Guardian Scholars program. And as soon as, whatever they gain their eligibility again, by meeting the SAP, then we bring them back into Next Step. And so just for continuity piece, we've decided to do it that way. And because I meet with all of our foster youth students, our Next Step and Guardian Scholars, it was easy for one person to kind of make the decisions based on what the students' feedbacks and all of the resources that I'm aware of to kind of make decisions based for our Next Step. So that's how that came about. I hope that answered the question. If not, I can go into more details. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So Veronica, I have a couple questions for you. So you mentioned that you receive a list of students from your K-12 liaisons. Can you clarify, is that a list of just foster youth that are prospective students coming in from the high schools, or is that a list of every single student that comes in? And if so, how do you hone in on the foster youth?
So there are two lists. The first one that Mark McNiff gets and combs through, that's a list of every student that may come to campus. And so it is not primarily just foster youth. It encompasses all students that might end up here on campus. So that's that first list. The second list that I receive is a list for our Extreme Registration Access to Higher Education event. And so that list is just 12th grade foster youth. That was put together specifically for the event, and they were identified by foster youth liaisons and the school district themselves in order for us to know who's coming, because there's so much preparation that needs to be done before the student gets here on campus.
Great, and then a follow-up question to that, in terms of the event, who is doing primarily the outreach to those lists? Is it the high school counselors that are recruiting students to come to the event, or are you coming to the campuses to let students know about them?
Yes, both. So I would say the primary recruitment for that would be the district liaisons and campus staff for the unified school districts. But when we do go to campuses and introduce ourselves and do our preliminary meetup with the students, again, these are the seniors, when we go out with our outreach teams, our FCC outreach teams, we go ahead and introduce ourselves and let them know that this event is coming and just remind them that whether or not they've been invited, remind them to go ahead and participate in that.
Great. And then I have a question, or somebody wrote in a question about the peer mentors. Well, the first question was how they were paid, which you actually subsequently addressed. But then the second part of the question was, how many hours per semester do the peer mentors work?
Okay, here on campus, we are bound to no more than 19 hours. So the student can work up till 19 hours if they so wish. My particular student does utilize the 19 hours, but I have had students that can't work all 19 because of their schedule. And so I just ask them ahead of time how much time that they actually want.
Great. So the next question I have, it could be either for Flo or Veronica. This is a question from a housing provider who's on the call, wanting to know how housing programs can get more involved in referring students to the program. And so she's thinking that there's a way that they can connect the housing programs to the school programs to make sure the youth are stabilized in all areas of life, so they'll have stable housing as well as support services in college. So for Veronica or Flo, do either of you want to speak to the relationships you have with local housing providers and how that works?
Sure, I'll speak to that.
Oh, it doesn't matter. You can go.
I'll speak a little bit and then you fill in the blanks because I'm sure there are going to be lots of them. The reality is that here on our particular community, housing is hard to come by. I'm sure we're not the only community that is like that. We work very, very closely with our foster youth transitional housing programs that are our go-to folks for our students. Unfortunately, Fresno City College does not have campus dorms. And so if we really do have a student that is really suffering from homelessness and needs that stability, we have also referred them over to our sister campus, Reedley, because they do have on-campus housing. But for the most part, students don't want to go outside of Fresno. And so that's where we need to really have those close communications and collaborations with our partners who do have housing. So again, most of the time we do refer over to our established housing for foster youth, which go through Aspiranet and Promesa. And that also can link them to the family unification program that Fresno County offers. We also utilize independent living program that has better connections with housing. And we also do use a local homeless team here in Fresno that does do assessments for housing for just the general community. And so we have them come here on campus to meet with our students to assess their homeless situation and then try to get them connected to community resources that are already existing here. As far as more communication with those particular entities and how I would go about doing that, I probably would say just join in on some of the meetings that are occurring. We do have our advisory meetings that we always reach out and ask transitional housing programs to come and present their information. We also ask others, but I know transitional housing has been one of the ones that we've asked to come and present to see what information they can give us as a meeting space or as a meeting group. And then, of course, I would ask them to give us a call, and I'm more than willing to go out and do an in-service for their team so their team can learn a little bit more about our program to see if their students would be interested or even eligible for it.
Great, thank you. Colleen, I've had a couple of eligibility questions that have just come in as we've been talking. So the first is, will a letter of guardianship work for Next Up? I have a student who was in foster care until age 13 and then was placed in a legal guardianship by the county through the age of 18.
Yeah, unfortunately, the student needs to have been in an actual foster care placement on or after their 16th birthday. So a guardianship placement doesn't count for eligibility. So that student wouldn't be eligible.
Great, thank you. And then another question is, so this question is referencing a new tool that is in the web grant system that a financial aid office can use to easily verify if a student qualifies for independent status on the FAFSA. So it's sort of a yes or no field that shows whether or not the student was in care after the age of 13 that now pops up on web grants. The question is, if a student is verified as a foster youth from this new tool on web grants, is that good enough? I'm asking because my understanding is the web grants verification is for any youth in care, not just the ones age 16 to 18.
So I think that person sort of answered their own question in that If it doesn't provide verification, age verification of when the student, verifying that the student was in care on or after their 16th birthday, and I'm not familiar enough with that link in web grants, and we can certainly go do more research. But if it doesn't provide age verification documenting that the student was in care on or after their 16th birthday, then that would not be adequate verification.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm familiar with that new tool, and it provides verification that the student was in care on or after their 13th birthday. So just to clarify, it doesn't verify that the youth was in care at any point, but it does verify that they were in care after the age of 13. So it doesn't align exactly with the Next Up eligibility, which is in care after the age of 16. So unfortunately, that's not a tool that can be definitively used to verify Next Up eligibility. One last point that I just want to make, for those of you who might be wondering about how to get in touch with your local K-12 district liaisons or your county foster youth services liaisons, or your folks at your child welfare agency, and you're not quite sure how to go about that, we here at John Burton Advocates for Youth also maintain a lot of that contact information and maintain relationships with those folks. So my information is available there on the screen. You should always feel free to reach out to me, and we will be happy to do what we can to help connect you to the right folks. So I don't see any other questions coming in, so thank you to everybody who sent in questions and those of you who tuned in for the whole webinar. If you have other ideas about topics that would be interesting to you to learn more about, please do feel free to send those suggestions to us. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be doing in the coming year in collaboration with the Community College Chancellor's Office, designed really at helping both Next Step programs and other programs that serve foster youth on the campuses to improve their practices and be most effective. So with that, I'm going to end this webinar, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of our attendees, and hope everybody has a great week.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.